Welcome to True Echo, where real stories echo louder than fiction. In today's powerful episode, we follow a man who wore sneakers instead of status, a hoodie instead of a title, and walked into his own company unnoticed. What happened next didn't just shake a terminal, it shattered an entire culture of quiet discrimination. This is the story of Darnell R. Whitaker, the undercover CEO who was told to wait outside, and returned with truth, justice, and a pink slip for everyone who had it coming. You won't believe what he uncovered, or how he changed everything in just one day. The morning air was cool and indifferent as Darnell R. Whitaker leaned against the steel rail outside Terminal B at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. The sun had barely lifted above the tarmac, casting long shadows on the pavement where shuttles hissed and rolled, oblivious to the man in scuffed sneakers and a gray hoodie. No security detail. No entourage. Just a faded backpack, a regular boarding pass, and a quiet fire in his chest. To most passers-by, he was just another traveler. Maybe a bit down on his luck. Maybe someone flying standby. But behind the calm demeanor and modest outfit stood the newly promoted CEO of Sky Connect Airlines, a company worth billions, with over 12,000 employees, 200 aircraft, and a global presence. And no one recognized him. That was exactly how he wanted it. 3 weeks earlier, he had rejected the traditional PR-heavy tour that typically accompanied new executives. No catered lunches, no grand handshakes or press photos. Instead, he decided to go undercover, real, raw, and unannounced. The trigger? A complaint from an elderly black woman in Baton Rouge who had been asked to leave a lounge she paid for because staff weren't sure she belonged. That sentence hadn't left his mind since. Weren't sure she belonged. It was more than a mistake. It was a mirror. And Darnell needed to see how deep that reflection went. As he stepped into the terminal, he passed groups of teens in matching band shirts, busy flight crews, and a janitor who gave him the only nod of acknowledgement all morning. He returned the gesture. At Gate 24A, the flagship Sky Connect Premium Lounge stood in sleek contrast to the surrounding chaos, a gleaming glass sanctuary designed with his own vision. Equity. Elegance. Ease. He approached, reached for his Diamond Elite card, and smiled at the shift lead behind the counter, a woman in her late 30s with a stern expression and a name tag that read Taylor. But before he could even introduce himself, she cut him off. "Sir, this lounge is for Sky Connect Premium members only." "I am one," he said calmly, showing the card. "Diamond Elite, actually." Taylor didn't even glance at it. "We've had a lot of people try to sneak in lately. You'll need to wait outside. Security's right over there if you have questions." She didn't say it with rage. She said it with routine. Darnell didn't argue. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than anything he could have said. He stepped aside and sat quietly by a vending machine. And from there, through the not-so-soundproof glass, he heard everything. Darnell sat just a few feet from the glass, his elbows resting on his knees, watching and listening. Taylor's voice carried clearly as she chuckled with a tall man in a navy vest. "He really thought he was getting in here dressed like that?" The man, Riley, according to his name tag, snorted. "Looked like he was headed to a Waffle House, not the Diamond Lounge." Taylor sipped from a sleek stainless tumbler. "I swear, these people think flashing a card makes them somebody." There it was again. These people. It didn't even sting anymore. It just clarified. Taylor wasn't some exception, she was the system. Smiling for some, scrutinizing others. Darnell had seen it throughout his life, but hearing it in his lounge, under his company's name, added a sharp new edge. He watched as 4 more passengers approached the entrance. First, a white man in a Patagonia vest strolled up, phone out, and was buzzed in without question. Then a younger white woman in yoga pants and Uggs barely paused. Taylor smiled and nodded her through. An older Asian couple had their tickets examined briefly before being waved in with polite efficiency. And then came a young black man in a sleek designer tracksuit and headphones. He looked confident as he presented his platinum card, but confidence wasn't enough. Taylor's tone shifted. "I'm going to need a government-issued ID and a confirmed boarding pass," she said firmly. "You can wait over there. It'll be a few minutes." He blinked, confused but polite, and did as told. Darnell watched him lean against the wall, checking his phone. In the next few minutes, 3 more people approached, all non-black, all admitted in seconds. Darnell had seen enough. He stood, slowly and deliberately, and made a call. "Marcus, it's me. I need you at Terminal B lounge entrance. 15 minutes. Bring Alex and the airport liaison. Don't say anything when you get here. Just stand with me." Then he walked back toward the desk. Taylor looked up and sighed. "Sir, I already told you." He raised a hand gently. "Just 1 more minute." Her jaw tightened. "Security can escort you out." "Don't bother," he replied. A sleek black SUV pulled up outside the terminal. 3 sharply dressed professionals walked briskly through the sliding doors and toward the lounge. Marcus Ingram, Sky Connect's Chief Strategy Officer. Alex Tran, Head of Customer Experience. And a woman from the airport's PR team. They said nothing. Just stood beside Darnell. Taylor's expression changed from irritation to confusion. Is everything okay?" Darnell removed his cap and looked her in the eyes. "I'm Darnell Whitaker, CEO of Sky Connect Airlines." The silence was instant. Taylor froze. Riley, behind the counter, looked like he'd swallowed a stone. The young man in the tracksuit, still waiting awkwardly by the wall, raised his eyebrows. "I tried to enter the lounge earlier as a Diamond Elite member," Darnell said evenly. "You refused me entry. You refused him, too." He pointed to the young man. The terminal's noise faded as a crowd began to form. "And I want to know," Darnell said, eyes narrowing slightly, "how long this has been happening." Before Taylor could speak, Riley laughed nervously. "Man, we're just trying to keep things tight around here, you know. Folks be trying to scam their way in all the time. We gotta be careful." Darnell tilted his head. "Careful with who exactly?" Silence. Taylor turned to her computer, typing as if trying to hide behind the screen. Marcus stepped forward, but Darnell raised a hand. "I don't need anyone to speak for me." He turned to Riley. "I watched you let 6 people in without checking a single name. No ID. No boarding pass. You didn't even slow them down. But you stopped me. You stopped him." He nodded toward the young man. "And you made assumptions." Taylor opened her mouth. Darnell cut her off. "Don't. Please. Just don't." He turned to the young man. "What's your name?" Terrell. "Terrell Mayfield," he said. "I just made platinum last month, man. First time trying to come in here." Darnell nodded. "I'm sorry this was your first experience with us." Terrell shrugged, but his voice was quiet. "Ain't the first time something like this happened, though. That hit harder than anything else." Darnell turned and walked past the stunned employees, right into the lounge. He stopped near the center and addressed the growing crowd. "My name is Darnell Whitaker. I'm the CEO of this airline. Some of you may not know me. And that's okay. I didn't come here to be seen. I came here to see." Heads turned. Phones discreetly lifted. A few people leaned forward. "I wanted to know what this place feels like when you're not in a suit or behind a press badge. I watched how people were treated. And what I saw confirmed what many of you have been telling us for a long time." He pointed toward the glass. "This isn't about membership levels. This is about judgment." As murmurs spread, a voice rose from the back. A woman in her 60s stood, black slacks, maroon blouse, gray twists pulled into a bun. She held a book in one hand, tea in the other. "Mr. Whitaker," she said softly. "I know who you are. We met 5 years ago at a Black Professionals in Aviation event. I was the only gate agent in the room." Darnell blinked. Then nodded. "I remember. I said titles don't define leadership. You also said that if you ever got the chance to run a company, you'd make sure people like me weren't overlooked again." She stepped forward. "I've worked here 31 years. Trained people who now outrank me. And I've been told, in uniform, to use the employee break room instead of this lounge, more than once." Gasps filled the room. Taylor looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "I didn't say anything," the woman added. "But maybe I should have." "You're saying something now," Darnell replied. "And it matters." He turned to Marcus and Alex. "I want every employee who submitted complaints about this location reviewed. I want lounge access logs pulled for the last 90 days. Taylor's face went pale. "Effective immediately," Darnell continued, "this lounge is under direct review. No one steps behind that desk again until they've been retrained and reevaluated." He looked Taylor in the eye. "You're not being removed because of what happened today. You're being removed for everything that happened before it, when nobody was watching." The room remained still. And yet, Darnell knew this was just the beginning. The hush in the lounge was deafening. Passengers who had been sipping lattes and scrolling through phones now sat upright, faces stiff with a mixture of shock and curiosity. Taylor stood frozen, lips slightly parted, staring as if hoping someone would say it was a joke. Riley's face was harder to read, part arrogance, part embarrassment, and all discomfort. Darnell didn't flinch. He turned to Terrell, still standing awkwardly near the wall. "You're welcome here," he said plainly. "You always were." Terrell blinked, unsure whether to laugh or thank him. But he grinned, crossed the threshold, and plopped down into a plush seat near the lounge's center. "All right then," he said, stretching out. "Guess I'll enjoy the 5-star treatment." A few chuckles broke the tension, but the deeper silence lingered. Darnell could feel it. That hush wasn't just the sound of stunned employees, it was the weight of unspoken stories in the room. Years of silent exclusions. Quiet moments of humiliation. Shrugged off slights that had never made it into formal complaints. But today was different. Security quietly arrived near the entrance. Not to remove Darnell, but to hold the line. Taylor and Riley were asked to step aside. Neither said a word. No tantrums, no yelling. Just the quiet horror of knowing the ground beneath them had cracked wide open. Minutes later, Darnell sat in a private conference room within the terminal, accompanied by Marcus, Alex, and Yvette Dorsey, Sky Connect's newly appointed Director of Equity and Accountability. A thick folder sat in front of her. "We pulled the last 90 days of lounge access data, staff logs, and surveillance footage," she began. "It's worse than expected." "How bad?" Darnell asked. Alex answered before she could. 73 documented incidents. 14 involved verbal complaints that never got officially recorded. 11 guests were escorted out, every one of them either black or Latino. Yvette slid a folder toward him. 3 employees filed internal reports on discriminatory behavior by lounge staff. 2 said they were threatened with retaliation. 1 was reassigned without explanation. Darnell flipped the folder open. The words burned. "I was told I needed to stop letting just anyone in. Supervisor said certain folks don't fit the image we want. When I pushed back, my hours got cut." He sat back in his chair. Exhaled slowly. "This isn't neglect," he said quietly. "This is culture. And culture can't be fixed with memos," Yvette added, her tone sharp. Alex leaned forward. We've already identified 3 other lounges with the same patterns. Similar behavior. Same kind of staff profile. You want us to start making calls? Darnell didn't answer immediately. He stood and walked toward a wall-mounted screen where paused footage showed Taylor buzzing in a white passenger without even glancing at his ticket. Timestamp, 5 minutes after she had rejected Darnell. He pressed play. Then another clip. Same week. Same pattern. Different face. Different voice. Same outcome. He paused the screen again, his jaw tight. We'll start here, he said. But this is going bigger. He turned to Yvette. I want a new training model, no more PowerPoints and scripted videos. I want role play. Immersive simulations. Case studies. Let people feel what bias looks like. Not just read it. Yvette nodded, already scribbling notes. And consequences, she asked. Sharp ones, Darnell said without hesitation. Especially for management. If a supervisor lets this happen under their watch, they're part of the problem. No second warnings. He turned to Alex. And I want a new employee feedback system. Direct to my desk. Monthly. No filters, no rewrites. Raw truth. Alex blinked. All of them. That's a lot of emails. Darnell didn't blink. All of them. The room stilled again. Then Yvette asked the question they all knew was coming. And the staff you removed today? They'll be formally let go before the end of the day, Darnell replied, without hesitation. HR is handling it. But this isn't just about 2 people. It's about the culture we've allowed to fester in the quiet. He picked up his bag. Discrimination doesn't always shout, he said. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it delays you at a counter, asks for ID it didn't ask the last guy for. Sometimes it smiles while it denies you the dignity you've already earned. He moved toward the door. Alex called after him. Where are you going? Darnell paused. To the gate, he said. There's something I still need to say. He didn't wait for a reply. Gate 24A looked different now. A small crowd had gathered outside the lounge, whispering and watching. Rumors had already begun to swirl, cell phones buzzing with social media updates, travelers wondering who the quiet man in the hoodie had really been. Darnell stood at the center of it all, a mic clipped to his jacket. Sky Connect's media team had arrived, called in discreetly by the airport liaison. They had one directive: don't script it. Just record it. This wasn't a press event. It was a reckoning. He looked out at the crowd, frequent flyers, economy travelers, off-duty staff. One of them was Terrell, leaning against the back wall with his arms crossed and a cautious smile. Another was the older woman from the lounge, standing beside a younger black flight attendant who watched with wide, hopeful eyes. Darnell looked into the camera. My name is Darnell R. Whitaker. I'm the CEO of Sky Connect Airlines. The crowd stilled. You could hear phones sliding into pockets. Zippers closing. The energy shifted like a held breath. I didn't come here this morning to give a speech, he began. I came here to experience what our guests experience when no one's watching. I wore a hoodie. I carried a backpack. I didn't tell anyone who I was. He paused. And within 5 minutes, I was told to wait outside. The crowd murmured, the words hitting different in real time. That didn't hurt my feelings, he continued. I've been underestimated before. But what I saw after that hurt something deeper. It hurt our values. It hurt our promise. He gestured toward the lounge, now closed and darkened behind him. We just relieved the entire management team at Gate 24's Sky Lounge. Not for a single mistake, but for creating and maintaining a culture that excluded people who had every right to be included. He took another breath. This isn't a stunt. This isn't damage control. This is a reset. Because systems don't change when you look away. They change when you look harder. He glanced toward the camera again. Every Sky Connect lounge in this country is being re-audited. Today. New training is being built. Feedback will come straight to my desk. And frontline staff will be held to the same standard we expect of executives. He looked back to the crowd. You don't have to believe me right now. Just watch what we do next. And with that, he stepped away. No applause. No music. Just quiet realization. But Darnell wasn't done yet. The moment he stepped away from the camera, Darnell felt the weight shift, not lift, but shift. The speech was over, but the work was just beginning. Behind him, the lounge remained dim, its temporarily closed sign casting a symbolic shadow over the gate. People slowly returned to their seats, but their expressions lingered somewhere between awe and reflection. Darnell moved briskly through the terminal, retracing his earlier steps. This time, eyes followed him. Not because he wore a suit or strode with a security detail, but because the truth had finally stood up and spoken. And in an airport, where thousands pass by unnoticed, that kind of truth echoes. He passed the janitor who had nodded at him earlier. Hey, Darnell said, stopping mid-stride. Thanks for the nod this morning. The janitor blinked, confused for a moment. Sir. Curtis, right? Darnell asked. The janitor nodded slowly. Yes, sir. I noticed. Just wanted you to know, people like you hold this place together. Curtis's face cracked into a surprised grin. Appreciate that, Mr. Whitaker. No, Darnell said. I appreciate you. Moments later, Darnell was back inside Sky Connect's temporary operations hub, an unmarked room with white walls, a long conference table, 3 laptops, and a clock that now ticked louder than ever. Yvette and Alex were already inside, documents spread before them like evidence in a trial. I need the last piece, Darnell said as he closed the door. Alex pulled up a surveillance reel. This is from a week ago. Different lounge. Phoenix Terminal. The footage played. Same scenario. A black woman in business attire presenting her card, only to be asked for additional verification. Then a white man 2 spots behind her, buzzed through without pause. The timestamp? 2 minutes apart. Another clip. This one from LaGuardia. A young Latino man laughed off by a lounge staffer for, probably printing a fake card. No ID check. No follow-up. Just an assumption. Darnell didn't need to see more. Start the audits nationwide, he said. Now. Yvette didn't hesitate. We'll need backup staff to rotate into any flagged lounges. Pull them from HQ, Darnell replied. If they're trained in our values, they're qualified to show others how it's done. Then he picked up a yellow legal pad from the table. The same one he'd scribbled on that morning before heading to the terminal as a disguised traveler. He flipped back to the top. Memo to all Sky Connect employees, effective immediately. He read it aloud. Word by word. No skipped lines. No edits. Just the raw truth that had poured out of him after everything he'd seen, heard, and endured. When he finished, the room was still. Yvette spoke first. You want to release it as is? Exactly as I wrote it, Darnell said. She nodded. Then we'll print, email, and upload it to every employee portal. Darnell looked at Alex. Still think it's too many emails to read? Alex exhaled. Not anymore. Good, Darnell said. Because if even one of those emails contains a voice we haven't heard yet, it's worth it. They began working in silence, sending alerts, preparing the memos rollout, drafting the audit protocols. But Darnell knew there was still one final stop left, one person he needed to speak to before closing the day. He returned to the interview room, where Taylor and Riley sat with folded arms and stiff shoulders. No lawyers, no corporate spin doctors. Just HR and the CEO they'd mocked that morning. "You've read the complaints?" he asked Taylor calmly. She didn't respond. "They're not all from guests," Darnell continued. "Some came from your coworkers. Some were anonymous. People who said they tried to raise red flags but were ignored, or punished." Taylor rolled her eyes. "And you think firing me fixes it?" "I think accountability starts somewhere," Darnell replied. "You came in here pretending to be someone else," she said. "What did you expect?" "I expected fairness," he said. "Respect. The kind you owe every person who walks through that door." She scoffed. "This whole thing is dramatic. People get checked all the time. Some folks just get sensitive about being told no." Darnell stared at her for a long moment. "Did you ever consider," he said, voice quiet but steady, "that maybe people aren't being sensitive? Maybe, they're just tired." That landed hard. Even Riley sat up straighter. Darnell turned to him. "You said this was overkill. Still think that?" Riley shrugged. "I mean, I get it now. I didn't see how bad it looked before. I guess I was just doing what we always did." "There it is," Darnell said. "That phrase, what we always did. That's how injustice survives. That's how discrimination becomes invisible. That's how you end up with 73 incidents in 90 days and nobody says a word." He looked between them, then stood. "You had a chance to be the face of everything this company claims to stand for. And you chose to judge. To mock. To exclude." Taylor tensed. "So what now? You just throw us away?" Darnell took a long breath. "You're not being fired because I'm angry," he said. "You're being fired because too many others were ignored. We set standards. You had chances. We trained you. You chose sarcasm over service. Bias over professionalism." He stepped back. "But here's the part that's different this time, I'm not replacing you with more of the same. We're rebuilding. With a new team. A new system. And new oversight, around the clock." Taylor looked down, finally silent. Riley didn't speak either. Darnell grabbed his memo off the table, folded it into his jacket pocket, and walked toward the door. He paused for just a second, looked over his shoulder, and said, "We don't ground people at Sky Connect based on what they wear or what they look like. We don't strip them of dignity at the front desk." Then he opened the door. "Not anymore." Darnell walked out of the room with the kind of finality that doesn't need a slammed door or raised voice. The click of the handle behind him said enough. Taylor and Riley were officially out, and the space they left behind wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. That lounge, that desk, that gate, it would never be the same again. Back in the corridor, Yvette met him with a subtle nod. "It's done," she said. "HR issued the termination paperwork. We're clear." Darnell didn't celebrate. There was no satisfaction in cleaning up a mess that should never have been allowed to spread. But there was purpose. And that, at least, kept him walking forward. The rest of the day moved fast. Audit teams were deployed to 3 other lounge locations, Phoenix, LaGuardia, and Charlotte. Internal communications were sent to all managers with one instruction: review staff behavior logs immediately, especially for team leads. The employee memo was posted in every Sky Connect portal, printed in back offices, and pushed to inboxes with CEO directive, urgent, flagged. But Darnell didn't retreat to an office to manage it from afar. He returned to the concourse, walking terminal to terminal, not as an executive, but as a listener. At gate 15, he stood behind a single mom juggling a toddler and a stroller. She sighed as the gate agent barked boarding instructions like commands in a drill. Darnell stepped forward. You okay? She glanced over, surprised. Just, tired. This airline's been the worst today. I'm sorry to hear that, he said, handing her the sippy cup her daughter had dropped. Not your fault, she replied, then paused, narrowing her eyes. Wait, are you the guy, from earlier? That video's all over Twitter. He didn't confirm or deny. Just smiled. Later, at a baggage carousel, a mechanic in a reflective vest approached him. Sir. Mr. Whitaker, he said, eyes wide. I saw what you did. Darnell turned. What we did, he corrected gently. We're just getting started. And that was the truth. By the time evening settled over the airport, the lounges had begun clearing out for the night. Gate 24A was closed with official signage and velvet rope. A skeleton crew of corporate-trained ambassadors stood just outside, explaining the change and welcoming questions. Terrell, still dressed in his tracksuit, was now seated with two other travelers in the main terminal, chatting casually. When Darnell passed, the young man stood. Yo! Terrell called. You really flipped the whole thing today, huh? Darnell smiled. Still flipping it. You know, Terrell said, rubbing the back of his neck, when she told me to wait by the wall. I wasn't even surprised. I didn't get mad. Just felt tired. Darnell nodded slowly. That's how it starts. Not with rage, but with resignation. And that's what we're ending today. Glad you saw it, Terrell said. More glad you said something. They shook hands. Keep flying with us, Darnell said. We've got a lot to prove. As Terrell walked off, Darnell sat down on one of the empty benches near the vending machine, the same one where he'd waited that morning. The same one where he had first heard the words these people whispered with entitlement. But the bench felt different now. Not because the surroundings had changed, but because the silence had been broken. He pulled the yellow memo back out from his pocket and reread the ending. If you're here to grow, to serve with dignity, empathy, and purpose, this is your moment. We are rebuilding. We are choosing better. We are listening. Finally. And for the first time in years, Darnell felt something he hadn't felt in a long time at work, not pride, not power, but hope. He stood, stretched, and walked back to the Sky Connect executive suite tucked away in the restricted area. The day wasn't over, not yet. In a quiet hallway just outside the boardroom, he spotted the older woman from the lounge, the one who had stood and spoken her truth without bitterness or drama. She was just slipping her ID badge into her coat and preparing to leave. You heading out? He asked. She turned. Yes, Mr. Whitaker. I figured I said what needed saying. You did, he replied. And I hope you'll say more. She blinked. Sir. I want you to be part of the retraining task force, Darnell said. You've seen it from the inside, every angle. You've lived it. We need your perspective. The woman didn't speak for a moment. Then she smiled. I never got promoted, she said quietly. But maybe that's because I was waiting to help rebuild instead. Then let's get started, Darnell said. They walked side by side down the corridor. No cameras. No press. Just two professionals, long underestimated in very different ways, finally setting the course. And somewhere far above them, a Sky Connect jet took off into the night. The next morning, the first meeting of the Sky Connect Reformation Task Force convened in a modest conference room on the airport's mezzanine level. No chandeliers. No press. Just whiteboards, coffee, and people who'd earned their seat not through titles, but experience. At the head of the table sat Darnell. Next to him, the older lounge worker from the day before, her name was Gloria Campbell. 31 years with the company. Trained more people than she could count. Overlooked just as many times. Now, she was leading the team that would shape the airline's next chapter. Also present were Terrell, yes, the young man in the tracksuit, now invited not as a guest, but as a voice from the customer side. A reminder of how people who don't look the part still deserve a say in how things work. Yvette Dorsey was there, leading equity efforts, and Marcus and Alex represented corporate strategy and customer experience. Darnell stood first. "We don't need a slogan," he began. "We need a standard. A culture that doesn't just react to outrage, but prevents it. That starts here." Gloria cleared her throat. "There's something we all need to face," she said. "Bias doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it's a raised eyebrow, a longer pause, or ignoring someone's question. That's what exhausted our people. That's what made them give up." She paused. "And when your people give up, your company starts to rot." Nobody argued. Alex pulled up a slide from a recent guest survey. The screen flashed red on one key stat. 63% of minority passengers said they'd had at least one experience of unequal treatment by lounge or gate staff in the last 12 months. "That's not occasional," Darnell said. "That's operational." Terrell leaned forward. "You know what would have made a difference for me yesterday? Not just someone apologizing after the fact. But someone standing up during it. Allyship in real time," Gloria nodded. "Not just HR follow-ups." Darnell gestured to Yvette. "Let's build that into the training model. Not just what bias looks like, but what resistance looks like. What intervention looks like." Yvette scribbled rapidly on her notepad. "Understood. We'll create conflict scenarios. Force teams to role-play uncomfortable moments. Watch who steps up and who stays silent. And let silence count as failure," Gloria added. "Because it is." That single statement hung in the air like a challenge. Over the next few hours, they crafted the bones of a transformation model unlike anything the airline had ever attempted. Every lounge employee, starting with team leads, would undergo a week-long immersive training, led by both equity consultants and long-tenured employees like Gloria. Every lounge would receive a quarterly bias audit. And most radically, customer feedback would be paired with video analysis, not just logged and filed. "If someone says they were treated differently, we won't just look at the log," Darnell explained. "We'll watch it happen. No hiding behind the she said anymore." Alex hesitated. "There'll be pushback. Some managers will say it's invasive. Big brother stuff." Darnell shook his head. "Then those managers should find other jobs. We're not here to coddle the comfortable." By the end of the session, the framework was approved. The first lounges to undergo the transformation would be Atlanta, Phoenix, LaGuardia, and Chicago O'Hare. Every regional director would be required to participate, no exemptions. As the team filtered out, Gloria lingered. "I still can't believe you brought me in," she said softly. Darnell smiled. "I still can't believe no one did it sooner." She laughed. "They didn't see me. I see you now," Darnell said. "And so will everyone else." They shook hands. No fanfare. Just mutual respect. That night, Darnell returned to his hotel room overlooking the runways. Jets came and went like clockwork. The glow of the tarmac shimmered through the window, and yet he couldn't stop thinking about the bench. That cold metal seat near the vending machine where it had all begun. The place where he'd been told to wait outside, in a company he owned. He pulled out his phone and opened his notes app. Leadership doesn't just live in offices and boardrooms. It lives in lobbies. It lives in lounges. It lives at the gate where someone gets told, "Not you." If we don't protect dignity in those moments, we've already lost the sky. He saved the note and closed the app. Then he did something rare, he smiled. Not because the work was done, but because it had finally started. 2 weeks later, Sky Connect Airlines looked the same on the outside. Same blue and silver livery. Same advertisements on the walls of terminals. Same boarding passes and boarding zones. But inside, at the counters, behind the lounge doors, and especially in the culture, it was a different airline. At Gate 24A, the once quiet terminal hub now buzzed with intention. The lounge had reopened under interim leadership, staffed with hand-picked ambassadors trained in the newly launched Equity First program. The old gatekeeper-style desk was gone, replaced by an open check-in island with clear signage. Respect first. Questions welcome. Everyone seen. And standing near the edge of that redesigned space, once again in jeans and sneakers, was Darnell R. Whitaker. He wasn't there for press. Wasn't giving a speech. He was just, watching. Listening. A young Latina woman approached the lounge entrance, glancing down at her membership card with uncertainty. Before she could say a word, the attendant, one of Gloria's newly trained hires, greeted her with a warm smile and said, "Welcome in. Let me take a quick look at your info, and we'll get you comfortable." The woman looked stunned for a second, then smiled. Darnell nodded to himself. That was what change looked like. Not banners or slogans, but moments. Hundreds of small, quiet moments that added up to something lasting. As he turned to walk away, a voice called out from behind him. "Mr. Whitaker." It was Curtis, the janitor he'd spoken to that first morning. He jogged up, holding a small envelope. "Corporate sent this to my locker today," he said, slightly out of breath. "Thought it was a mistake." Darnell opened it. Inside was a letter. Effective immediately, Curtis W. Barnes is being offered a new role as lead environment supervisor at Terminal B, with expanded responsibilities and salary adjustment based on exemplary service. Curtis scratched his head. "What does that even mean?" "It means," Darnell said, grinning, "we need more like you." Curtis blinked, then looked down at the envelope like it might vanish. "I've been sweeping these floors for 15 years. Never thought anyone noticed." "They did," Darnell said. "They just didn't say it. But that changes now." As Curtis walked off in stunned silence, Darnell checked his phone. A message from Yvette had come through. Phase 1 complete. Chicago lounge audit returned high marks. No flagged behavior. We're expanding next to DFW and LAX. He replied with one word. Approved. Minutes later, he arrived at a small internal studio where the Sky Connect team had asked for one last video, something short and permanent to sit on the internal employee portal, under a new tab labeled, "The Culture We Stand For." He sat on a stool, no fancy backdrop, just a simple screen behind him that read, "True North." The producer counted down silently, 3, 2. Darnell looked into the camera. His voice was calm, steady, grounded. "I didn't take this job to be liked. I took it because too many people had stopped believing that companies like this could care. I took it because someone once told me that the culture of a company isn't built in boardrooms, it's built at the gates." He paused. "I'm not asking anyone to be perfect. But I am asking that we never again ignore the quiet harm that happens when judgment walks in before kindness does. We serve people from every walk of life. And if we want to fly higher, we can't afford to keep anyone grounded because of how they look, dress, or sound." Another beat. "We don't just fly aircraft here. We fly standards. And that means treating every single person like they belong. Because they do. And if you can't get behind that, this isn't your airline." He nodded once to the camera. Then stood and walked off set. The video was live by end of day. Employees watched it from terminals, break rooms, mobile devices in flight. And as it made its way across every corner of Sky Connect's internal network, something began to change. People didn't just clock in. They showed up, with eyes open, with hearts wider, and with a simple but powerful directive: see everyone. Back at gate 24A, Terrell walked into the lounge wearing the same tracksuit. This time, no one stopped him. No one asked for extra ID. No one looked twice. He found a corner chair, leaned back, and opened a book. Across the room, Gloria passed him with a clipboard. They nodded at each other, two strangers once dismissed, now quietly connected in the very space that once said, "Not you." And outside the glass, Darnell was already walking toward the next gate. At True Echo, we bring you stories that don't just entertain, but shift something inside you. Today's story is a reminder that leadership isn't about status, it's about vision. The courage to listen. The strength to confront. And the humility to change. As Darnell Whitaker said, respect isn't earned by suits or titles. It's owed to everyone the moment they walk through the door. If this story moved you, drop a comment. Share it with someone who's ever been told they don't belong. And don't forget to subscribe to True Echo, because the world needs more stories like this one.